This is ADHD brain for you. It was interesting with Mark doing the clicker earlier. For the last two people, I realised, and I mentioned this actually before, and it brought it back to my head again that to someone else outside, that like 16 years ago, I actually had AI for my television. I had a voice-controlled interface, and she was called Molly, and she was 6, and she had the remote control, and I'd say, BBC 2, please, Molly, and Kudunk, and she wrote for Freddo's. She was brilliant. So if you don't have a system, just get a small child. They work just as well. So yes, trying to get back on track. She's now 21. She wouldn't mind me saying this. Right, okay. Here we go. So BBC, yes, I've already done all that bit. BBC is an interesting organisation. So I've been with it for 14 years, did not join to do accessibility, and that's an entire, I used to make TV trails. But we have, on our passes, we have certain things called the BBC values that are stuck on the back of it. Values, it's always a running joke if anyone watches W1A, but these things do exist. And they're quite straightforward, but the second one is actually where a lot of missions, and it comes from other places as well, within our policy around accessibility comes from, and it says audiences are at the heart of everything we do. We start with people, and we work towards what we're going to do. And this is a really, really important point. This is Tony Hall, by the way. It's a picture of Tony Hall. He's the Director General of the BBC. I'm not just going to necessarily talk about Tony, but talk about all the Director Generals, because they all refer back to these values. We all look at policy and we discuss stuff. It's fascinating because I've never had a conversation really with a Director General of why we do accessibility. It's always about how. And it's one of those things. I'm going to do a little bit of whistle-stop tour of accessibility to the BBC, but it's been in the fabric of the organisation really for decades. And last time when I did meet Tony, I didn't go for a muffin with Tony. If anyone watches W&A, you'd get that. But I was explaining to him, and it's an interesting point that Robin and a couple of other people have made earlier, that actually accessibility isn't necessarily a disability-related thing.
And we were talking about subtitle provision, and I thought this is a great place to make a point. And I said, just look at the news floor, and there's about 300.
And I thought this is a great place to make a point. And I said, just look at the news floor, and there's about 300 odd journalists.
And every single one of them has got subtitles switched on. It's an open plan office. You can't turn the sound up. So it's a real problem for those journalists to access that stuff and have conversations at the same time, and stay in touch with stuff. So I said they've all become
access that stuff and have conversations at the same time and stay in touch with stuff. So I said they've all become
all our news feeds at this moment. They would have a really difficult time doing their job. It is mainstream.
All our news feeds at this moment.
So something Tony actually did say when he joins, and they all say, every new Director General has a speech to all of the staff. We have like an internal TV channel.
Has a speech to all of the staff. We have like an internal thing, TV channel, which gets switched on every now and again. We subtitle everything, it's great. And he talks to the entire staff and members of the staff.
Very awkward questions are asked. And he said something very, very important right in the first speech. And he said at the core of the BBC's role is something very simple, very democratic, very important, to bring the best to everyone. Wherever you are, whoever you are, whether you are rich or poor, old or young, that is what we do. Everybody deserves the best.
Whoever you are, whether you are rich or poor, old or young, that is what we do.
State it in that way. And I went back to him and I said, well, actually, accessibility is part of the delivery to everyone. And so really that's kind of what our role is, to enable that everybody to happen. At which point I went to my line manager and asked if I could change my title to the head of everybody to happen.
At which point I went to my line manager and asked if I could change my title.
And even then they have this accessibility statement. There's a couple of slides, I won't talk through them, but the links on the slides will be shared and you can get onto the web and find this stuff. But there are a couple within the accessibility statement which are really important.
The web and find this stuff, but there are a couple within the accessibility statement which are really important.
It's embedded into the design and development of future products and services, and ensuring accessibility is core to designing or procuring products or services. Now, these are really, really important because actually the BBC...
Designing or procuring products and services. Now, these are really, really important because actually the BBC
We argued the case for that many years ago and won it. We said because what we want to do is we don't think it goes far enough, and we want stronger policies in the law, and we want to deliver against policy. If you give us the law, we will give you what the law states, but we don't think the law goes far enough.
If you give us the law, we will give you what the law states, but we don't think
government to prove that we actually are in that position.
And so that was an interesting statement. But we have regular conversation with government to prove.
We've always worked with audiences, going all the way back from the early days of putting up test cards to enable people to calibrate TVs in the early days.
Putting up test cards to enable people to calibrate TVs in the early days.
Programs and services. So accessibility from a BBC point of view.
And we've always delivered stuff around.
1964, For Deaf Children was the first signed TV children's programme. 1961, oh by the way, thanks.
Signed TV children's programme.
About the BBC, wherever he's sat now, if he's still in the room. Thank you. I had a history lesson about In Touch earlier. It did start in 1961, and Peter apparently was not involved from 1961, so he's not as old as I thought. Sorry, Peter.
It was David Scott Blackhall.
So he's not as old as I thought. Sorry, Peter.
David Scott Blackhall.
Vision On, which I remember, started in 1964, I'm not quite that old, which brought in BSL as well as even a wider children's audience. News Review for the Deaf started also the same year in 1964, so our first sign-interpreted TV programming for the news.
Started also the same year in 1964, so our first sign-interpreted TV programming.
One that I also would like to pick up as well is, and it's incredibly blurred slide in front of me, but Babelfish, but it's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy did something very important, which we don't often talk about in terms of accessibility.
So Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy did something very important, which we don't often talk about.
And they basically took the radio script and filmed it, which basically meant it didn't need describing, because all the description was already in the script, because it thought there wasn't any pictures. I mean, there was then additional stuff that was enrichment, but it actually wasn't necessary. There was then additional stuff that was enrichment. Which is why we never have any description in our journalistic output. It's all described, which then frees up all of that resource to do AD for drama and factual, and it means more of our input is accessible. We have Mr. Tumble, who's a personal favourite of mine and for everyone else under the age of 5.
Mr. Tumble. Who's personal favourite of mine.
He's a complete rock star for the under 5-year-olds. The loudest noise I have ever heard in my life is about 100 small children screaming when he walked into the room. Mr. Tumble, if you don't know him, he speaks Makaton in all his programming. It's one of the biggest shows that we've got for the under 6s.
In all his programming, it's one of the biggest shows that we've got for the under 6s.
Small children speaking Makaton, and this is a really important thing because they meet peers who need to communicate using Makaton, and then that breaks those barriers down. We also get complaints from parents who says, "Thank you very much for teaching our small children a secret language. We haven't got a clue what they're saying to each other."
Complaints from parents who says, "Thank you very much for teaching our small children a secret language. We haven't got a clue what they're saying to each other."
Something else as well from the history is we started working back in. It was 1973, 74, working at Southampton University on teletext was being developed at the time, and the first closed captioning system was being developed alongside that, which ended up launching in 1978.
The first closed captioning system was being developed alongside that.
Sometimes it doesn't always go well. I'll explain this slide. It's my favourite. We often get lambasted for the mistakes in subtitling, and this wasn't a mistake. It's actually a picture of Kanye West at Glastonbury.
In subtitling, and this wasn't a mistake, it's actually a picture of Kanye West.
I don't think you can take any more. We were all feeling it, it was fine.
Take any more. We were all feeling it.
You know, and this has kind of marched on into iPlayer, so I was there at iPlayer 1, and one of the things that we said at iPlayer 1, it has to be as least as accessible as TV.
iPlayer, so I was there at iPlayer 1, and one of the things that we said at iPlayer 1, it has to be as least as accessible as TV.
Broken in many and wonderful ways, and people haven't done it before, and we're now, you know, we subtitle actually to not just the broadcast stuff that's out on iPlayer, but all of the iPlayer first as well, and we're kind of marching on this other stuff, interesting stuff, which I wouldn't go down that rabbit hole around iPlayer on accessibility.
Marching on this other stuff, interesting stuff, which I won't go down that rabbit hole around.
As well, so we've got this huge challenge that not everything is long-form content.
Also kind of marching on.
And we have these automatically matched subtitles. You come across this, you're going to start coming across this more and more, where R&D have built a technology that takes a clip, takes an audio fingerprint of...
where R&D have built a technology that takes a clip, takes an audio fingerprint of...
goes off and retrieves those programs, creates audio fingerprints for those, slices out the bit that looks like the most candidate, rips out the subtitle, remarries it back up to the clip and puts it out live. And
rips out the subtitle and remarries it back up to the clip and puts it out live.
And it's also on the David Attenborough app worldwide. It did about 900 odd files absolutely accurate. This is not production ready, this is still trial, but we are looking at how to do these kind of things at scale.
This is not production ready, this is still trial, but we are looking at how to do these kind of things at scale, because this stuff is expensive.
But the mobile accessibility guidelines are fairly well known. We know other organisations use them. We don't build them for everyone else. They're there because the BBC has to be open about how it does stuff. So our guidelines actually are a reflection of what we do rather than what we try and do.
So our guidelines actually are a reflection of what we do rather than what we try and do. So we say,
and supplying the BBC.
Right at the beginning,
you know, go and use whatever you like, but this is about us. And it actually reflects best practice that is already happening rather than is used as something that defines best practice.
Best practice that is already happening.
That makes sense. So,
used as something that defines best practice. Does that make sense? Can't think that makes sense. So
someone new comes along, finds out, but wants to actually read about it. People do sit down and read guidelines. It's a tough task, but we try and make them as friendly as possible. Also, a lot of the stuff is designed, is embedded within other parts of our guidelines. So, global experience language, all our design-related stuff within there.
Embedded within other parts of our guidelines. So, global experience language, all our design-related stuff within there. And there's accessibility within our editorial guidelines.
The way we kind of approach accessibility is instead of telling people to deliver against guidelines, we train them and then use guidelines as a reference material for the training so everyone understands what it is. And we have literally hundreds of developers and designers. You can't police stuff at the scale that we do. So we give them all the base knowledge and then... You can't police stuff at the scale that we do. So we give them all the base knowledge, and then beyond that base knowledge, the training course we then have champions. They then come to us,
so
and they go, I want to learn all about this. And we go and talk to their line manager and says, can this be part of their personal development plan? Can they be the voice of accessibility within a team project, or there might be multiple voices, and they can be doing anything. They can be designer, a developer, product manager, quality assurance.
Multiple voices, and they can be doing anything. They can be a designer, a developer, product manager,
and so we train them within their role. And so they don't take responsibility for accessibility, but they make sure at every sprint, at every part of the conversation is happening. We have 150 of these people within the organisation, and they support each other. We provide the tools and Slack channels and all sorts of stuff. And we find someone in children's goes, oh my God, the wheels are coming off over here.
Provide the tools and Slack channels and all sorts of stuff. And we find someone in children's goes, oh my God, the wheels are coming off.
And they fix each other's problems and teach each other, and we kind of facilitate that.
And
we do other stuff that's very, very specific project. So on the slide here is actually a bunch of fonts. There's BBC Read Sans at the top, Arial Guild Sans, which are fonts. There's BBC Read Sans at the top, Arial Guild Sans, which are currently subtitle font and Helvetica.
Tiresias,
we decided that none of the ones below actually met what we needed as our requirements around readability and legibility. And the exec gave us the opportunity to create our own font, and accessibility has been absolutely at the core of the development of it. And I could do...
Accessibility has been absolutely at the core of the development of it.
And please get in touch with me, and then I can poke you in the direction of all sorts of different things and explain all the stuff that we've done within
Please get in touch with me, and then I can poke you.
So there's some future stuff that's going on here as well at the BBC. So when we're going to start, I'm going to get back to what I'm supposed to be talking about. So you know, we're constantly looking at new forms of content. You know, we start, we do with the.
So you know, we're constantly looking at new forms of content. You know, we start and we do them with the
was done on a trial was with the Antiques Roadshow, which is an obvious match when you think about the demographic, you know, so we're going to go for an older audience who's not tech savvy at all, and it was a play-along thing about guessing prices and all sorts of stuff. Hugely popular. I think we extended the trial for about a year.
Play-along thing about guessing prices and all sorts of stuff. Hugely popular. I think we had to extend the trial for about a year.
And so that ran for quite a while, but we actually realised then actually, you know, sort of looking at early adopters, looking at the younger audience, looking at the obvious things, we shouldn't be doing that. We should be looking at this as a very, very holistic thing. And people, when they get their head around it, have a lot of fun with these things.
We should be looking at this as a
this has kind of turned into, there's an incredibly dull slide up here. It says companion screen and streams DVB-CSS.
There's an incredibly dull slide up here. It says companion screen and streams DVB-CSS.
Which we're hoping will start to appear within TVs. I think Panasonic might have already done this, and others will follow. As it's a technical specification for second screen synchronization, which allows us to do really cool stuff, and particularly around accessibility. Again, this is another presentation.
Really cool stuff, and particularly around accessibility. Again, this is another presentation. But it enables us
deliver
to deliver
on-screen graphics in accessible formats to the second screen. So, you know, something comes up on the news, you've then got the data in front of you, and you can play with it. It won't just suddenly disappear after 5 minutes from an inaccessible format that it was, you know, after 5 seconds or so, after 5 minutes. So we can start doing loads of really, really cool stuff. So that kind of stuff happens.
So we can start doing loads of really, really cool stuff. So that kind of stuff happens.
And built a Dalek. There's a thing about the BBC is you get enough engineers in a room and it all turns to Doctor Who. And it was like, what are we going to build that's not in a browser? A Dalek! Yay! We built a Dalek. And she was lovely. Apparently she was. She built a penny from the engineers. I didn't know they had gender. But this one did. And she was great. And we could, using this technology, deliver...
They had gender. But this one did. And she was great. And we could, using this technology, deliver all sorts of stuff.
I just went through my head, it's a whole new generation of children with even worse nightmares. But this was pure R&D. This is pure, at the moment, this is all exploration and a lot of fun around this, but it will enable us to build and create new accessible experiences.
Around this, but it will enable
back to Mr. Tumble again. Games are a big thing for us, and this is where I'm going to start.
Back to Mr. Tumble again. Games are a big thing for us, and this is where I'm going to start.
One thing we realised, we've always done accessible games, but we did mainstream games as well, and there's just something fundamentally wrong with this. When we looked at things like Vision On and Mr. Tumble and Magic Hands and so many other things, we're trying to mainstream within our broadcast out accessibility, and yet we were segregating within our games. And so we've kind of changed this.
Accessibility, and yet we were segregating within our games. And so we've kind of changed this.
Which has become quite a large project, and building our own games engine, building all of the technologies that we need to enable to do this, to actually understand not only is this an accessible gaming pattern, but is it fun? It's one of the things we learned. People were building accessible games that were just boring, you know, and children are the most critical audience.
Building accessible games that were just boring, you know, and children are the most critical audience.
That was rubbish, and that's you go home, I've been cry and start again. And they are absolutely awesome. And the latest one of those is the Pablo game that's just come out. For people who don't know Pablo, it's on CBBC. It's actually not only is all the talent. It's on CBBS. It's actually not only is all the talent. Autistic kids creating programs for autistic kids that are mainstreamed, and it's incredibly popular. And we've created
kids creating programs for autistic kids that are mainstreamed, and it's incredibly popular. And we've created our first game off the back of it using those same kids, and it's really good fun. And we try to make it as accessible, but also the thing is to teach all of the children something about autism within there. So it has to be on that educational level. So there's lots of other stuff. 3D radio, I shouldn't have put this in there. I could rant about 3D radio, but there's a lot of stuff about binaural, actual three-dimensional radio. Put your headphones on, and you are in three-dimensional space. We did the proms in 3D quite recently, so you can see it's called binaural. Binaural recording's been around for decades, probably, yeah, it is decades. But we've now creating it so we can.
We're also doing 360 and all sorts of stuff. We're doing virtual reality. This is from Turning Forest. as an image, and this was also, the thing is, it's virtual reality with three-dimensional audio. And one of the biggest problems with VR at the minute is it's so much of it is stereo.
Three-dimensional audio. And one of the biggest problems with VR at the minute is it's so much of it
is like listening to the TV. You don't get a three-dimensional experience, but to move through that space visually and audibly at the same time is something that we're really quite excited about around accessibility. As one person pointed out when we demoed a lot of this stuff to him, and he's been blind from birth, and he just said, I just want a first-person shooter with this because I'll have it.
And he's been blind from birth, and he just said, I just want a first-person shooter with this because I'll have you. But yes, so it's those kind of technologies are then going to be massively enabling. Echo and home. I've bunged these two things in there. There's an enormous amount of discussion going on around delivering services on these devices, and people are talking about conversational interfaces.
You know, it's all about. I mean, someone earlier said it's that intelligent assistant rather than a conversational interface, which is quite accurate. One thing I must say to them is don't ever get sarcastic and angry with these things because it's a machine learning nightmare. You know, as soon as it does it wrong for the 5th time, you go, that's great, thank you. I'm really enjoying this now.
You know, as soon as it does it wrong for the 5th time, you go, that's great, thank you. I'm really enjoying this now.
So yes, sarcasm, machine learning. I'd love to hear about what Watson does with sarcasm.
Yes, sarcasm, machine learning.
And it was from a Mancunian as well, like myself, and we're pretty sarcastic. So there must be something.
And it's from a Mancunian as well, like myself.
Some of the stuff that's also around IA is really, really important. It's all of the other stuff that's happening too. The BBC's becoming a login service.
Also around IA is really, really important. It's all of the other stuff that's happening too. The BBC's becoming a login service.
To know more about the individual user. We need to know, and one of the points I forgot to make about the children's stuff is the children's games are learning about the child. One of the things in some of our games we tried out is that a child, there's all sorts of different stuff that we try and do. You know, all the games have got an educational element to it, and they're fun as well.
There's all sorts of different stuff that we try and do. You know, all the games have got an educational element to it, and they're fun as well. And if a child gets to a point like on the Mr. Tumble game,
we never make it the child's fault, by the way. It's always Mr. Tumble's fault.
What are they supposed to do?
And so there's no pressure put on the child, and the child doesn't feel like they've failed. And there's also like a no-fail moment.
And so
just hit a space bar and things happen. The thing is, we just thought if they constantly don't quite finish the task, we can then, the game can then go,
they constantly don't quite finish the task. We can then, the game can
and make something flash over here because they're not, they're not doing it, or make it a noise over there because they're not seeing it, or we try and give them, we start adding more richness to the game to kind of help them move on. Biggest problem we had, and this is again with adding those kind of things to it, is
to kind of help them move on. Biggest problem we had, and this is again with adding those kind of things to it, is
that's it. The thing is, failing was so much fun. The kids were doing it on purpose. So it completely undermines the help that we're trying to give to the children. And that's one of these massive things, is what if human beings are not really that predictable. They will do something. If you give them enough incentive, they will do the,
not really that predictable. They will do something if you give them enough incentive. They will do the,
They take it out of the box, they get it in the box. That's the problem with children. And all that work that went into designing the game, we may as well have just given them a box because that was way more fun. And this is what they were doing. So they were playing the games in the ways that we weren't expecting them to play.
That was way more fun. And this is what they were doing.
There's other stuff happening as well that's going to be really, really important. So.
There's other stuff happening as well that's going to be really...
Anyone heard of object-based broadcasting? Object-based broadcasting is basically deconstructing broadcasts. So within a TV program, say within the audio, it's not just a stereo mix anymore. It's within it, we have tracks for the speech, we have tracks for the background noise, we have tracks for all different
anymore. It's within it, we have tracks for the speech, we have tracks for the background noise.
Ideas that actually the program is segmented into, this is the subject here, this is the subject here, this is the subject there. We can deconstruct the program into its component parts. They're the objects. The interesting stuff that if we have logging, we have information about people's habits or the time they've got. Usually at this time they'll watch for about 5 minutes, which means they're probably going off somewhere else.
People's habits or the time they've got. Usually at this time they'll watch.
Make something fit within their time frame. If we understand more about that person's habits, we can, within object-based reporting, we can actually start tailoring the content fitting with their habits rather than forcing them to an hour or half an hour. So object-based stuff is incredibly interesting for us. It also means you can pull parts from different programs together and create a new program.
Is incredibly interesting for us. It also means you can pull parts from different programs together and create a new program.
And all of this has got to have IA behind it. We've got to learn and create systems, and there is a lot of stuff going on. I know there's a lot of hard programs within R&D, but understanding what IA can do and what it can't do is that whole is so important at this point.
What IA can do
for us as an organisation
is so important at this point for us as an organisation.
It's this kind of reinventing, it's push and pull I've got up here on the screen. Not only when we talk about content, we're either pushing content to you or you're pulling it from us. And so this is the difference between online and TV. You know, when you switch on the TV, you usually don't know what you want to watch. Most people go there without programming. They just stick BBC One on or ITV on, or whatever they like.
You usually don't know what you want to watch. Most people go there without programming. They just stick BBC One on or ITV on or whatever they like. And
they let us program to them majority of the times. And the lean forward experiences, they're turning up with an agenda, which you do with VOD, which is what you do online. You never just switch on Google and go, give me something. It won't give you anything. You have to drive. And this is the IA with all of these things that going to start giving us things that are in the middle.
And this is the IA with all of these things are going to start giving us things that are in the middle. Whereas we're working with
through data, and then it's going to become this kind of much better working push-pull relationship. So I'm kind of right at the end now, and I think there's a huge amount of opportunity here.
Right at the end.
One of the things that I'm kind of most interested in from an accessibility point of view.
One of the things that I'm kind of most interested in from an accessibility point of view.
Is that they become overlays for visual interfaces. I hear too much going, oh, we can pop this on an EPG. It's like, no. EPGs are dreadful UX, even for a sighted person. And then trying to stick a completely different UX in audio on top of a really bad piece of design in the first place.
And then trying to stick a completely different UX in audio on top of a really bad piece
of design. But the interesting thing about some of these devices that we've got through from the manufacturers is that they're asking some really good fundamental questions about the UX. Absolutely starting point. And so when this becomes visual, and we've started from an audio point of view, it's got to follow the lead of what we're learning from the audio. It's got to go audio into visual.
It's got to follow the lead of what we're learning from the audio. It's got to go audio.
I think there's going to be some very, very interesting sort of successes and failures in this way over the next few years.
I think there's going to be very, very
interesting. It's going to be interesting from our own UX point of view of how we tackle it. And the other thing is, I think there's disenfranchised audiences at the moment that are going to really benefit from this. I've talked about children. Children are going to really benefit from
this. I've talked about children. Children are going to really benefit from.
So they can talk to them, and when it gets wrong, they just go, no. And no is a word they learn very quickly, and they can get a heck of a lot from it. And the other thing is older audiences who can't use assistive technologies, or people who struggle with assistive technologies because they're too complicated. Having something that's more humanistic and more, it feels
because they're too complicated. Having something that's more humanistic and more, it feels...
It's going to create quite a lot of opportunities. And again, this is such early days, and you know, we're busy watching other organisations and listening to other organisations and listening to our audiences and trying to understand how that's going to work. And I think I can't remember if someone made the point up here or made the point out there. Cognitive accessibility here is... I can't remember if someone made the point up here or made the point out there. Cognitive accessibility here it's a big buzzword in the accessibility community is around cognitive accessibility, and no one's really nailed what huge opportunities for us to understand this, because this is all based around sort of human thought patterns and interactions, etc. And we can start understanding how cognitive impairment, people like myself, if you want, because I'm ADHD double deficit dyslexic, I've already explained it, or you've already guessed it.
Myself, because I'm ADHD double deficit dyslexic, I think I've already explained it, or you've already guessed it, because I don't shut up. It's one of those things. It's going to find it fascinating. Much better way.
So really, that's it. For once, I've actually. Have I on time?
So really, that's it. For once, I've actually. Am I on time?